At 10:17 on a bright Tuesday morning, I made the one mistake that could have ended my career in a single sentence. I looked directly at my ice-cold boss in the middle of a crowded conference room, forgot every professional rule I had ever learned, and accidentally called her baby. The room went completely silent. She slowly lifted her eyes from the report in front of her, stared straight into my soul, and said, "Say that again." I wanted the floor to open beneath my chair. I wanted the fire alarm to ring. I wanted literally anything to happen except having to repeat what I had just said. Before we get into this emotional story, if you believe kindness can change people and that everyone deserves a second chance, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs a little hope today, leave a comment, and subscribe to Kindness Legacy. Your support helps us bring more stories of kindness, courage, and unexpected second chances. My name is Ronan Vale, and until that morning, I had spent 11 months working for the most intimidating woman I had ever met, Seraphina Voss. Seraphina was the chief executive officer of a rapidly growing architectural technology company, and everyone in the building knew her reputation. She was brilliant, disciplined, painfully punctual, and almost impossible to read. She never raised her voice because she never needed to. One quiet look from her could make an entire room of senior executives suddenly remember appointments they did not actually have. Employees called her the Ice Queen when they thought she couldn't hear. I never did. Not because I was braver than them, but because I had noticed something they hadn't. Seraphina wasn't cold. She was careful. Every morning, she arrived at exactly 8 o'clock, carrying a black coffee and a leather folder. She rarely spoke about herself. She never attended office parties. She never stayed for birthday celebrations. And whenever someone asked about her family, her expression changed for half a second before becoming unreadable again. I had learned not to ask questions. I was her executive project coordinator, which meant I spent more time around her than almost anyone else in the company. I knew which meetings exhausted her, which reports she preferred printed, which clients made her impatient, and that she secretly loved strawberry pastries even though she pretended not to. I had also learned that she was kind when nobody was watching. One afternoon, I saw her quietly pay for an employee's emergency dental treatment. Another time, she stayed in the office until nearly midnight because a junior designer was going through a family crisis and couldn't finish a presentation. She never mentioned those things afterward. She simply helped and moved on. That was when I realized the woman everyone feared was carrying something much heavier than any of us understood. My own life wasn't exactly easy either. I had been raised by my grandmother after losing my parents when I was young, and now that she was older, I worked hard to support her. Every paycheck mattered. Every mistake frightened me. I had promised myself that I would never become careless with my career because there were people depending on me. Then came the Tuesday morning that changed everything. We were preparing for the biggest presentation in company history. A major international client was considering a contract worth millions, and Seraphina had personally chosen me to coordinate the entire project. I had barely slept the previous night because my grandmother had been feeling weak, and I had spent several hours making sure she was comfortable before rushing home to finish the presentation. By 9:30 the next morning, the conference room was packed. Sunlight poured through the enormous glass windows, creating bright patterns across the polished table. Seraphina stood at the front, reviewing our presentation with the calm confidence of someone who had already calculated every possible problem. Then disaster struck. The main presentation file suddenly refused to open. Everyone froze. The IT department tried to fix it, but the system kept producing an error. The clients were already waiting downstairs. Seraphina looked at me, and for the first time since I had known her, I saw genuine concern in her eyes. I grabbed my laptop and began searching through backup folders. My hands were shaking. I knew the file was somewhere. I just needed to find it. Seraphina came over and stood beside me. She didn't blame me. She didn't panic. She simply leaned closer and asked me to breathe. I found the backup. Relief hit me so hard that I almost laughed. Without thinking, I turned toward her and said, "I found it, baby." The silence afterward was absolute. My brain replayed the sentence instantly. Baby. I had called my boss baby. My face became hot. Someone at the other end of the table slowly lowered a pen. Another employee suddenly became extremely interested in the ceiling. Seraphina stared at me. Then she stepped closer. Her expression was impossible to read. "Say that again," she said quietly. I swallowed. I wanted to disappear. I tried explaining that I had been exhausted and distracted, but somehow every word made the situation worse. Finally, I apologized so sincerely that even I could hear the desperation in my own voice. To my surprise, Seraphina didn't fire me. Instead, the corner of her mouth moved slightly. It wasn't quite a smile. But it was close. She turned toward the team and calmly announced that the presentation would continue in 5 minutes. Then she walked out of the room. I thought I was safe. I was wrong. For the rest of the day, I couldn't look her in the eyes. Every time she came near my desk, I became painfully aware of the ridiculous word I had accidentally used. But something strange happened. Seraphina seemed different. She spoke more gently. She occasionally smiled when I wasn't expecting it. At lunchtime, she left a small box of strawberry pastries on my desk without saying who had brought them. I knew immediately. That evening, just before everyone left, she called me into her office. The afternoon sunlight had turned golden, and the city beyond her windows looked unusually peaceful. She didn't sit behind her desk. Instead, she stood near the window with her arms folded. She told me she wasn't angry. Then she admitted something I never expected. She said that nobody had called her something affectionate in years. Her fiancé had died several years earlier in a car accident just weeks before their wedding. Afterward, she had thrown herself into work because work was easier than grief. People assumed she was heartless because she stopped letting anyone get close enough to hurt her again. I suddenly understood the silence behind her eyes. I told her I was sorry. She looked at me and said she didn't want pity. So I told her I wasn't offering pity. I was offering respect. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she smiled. It was the first real smile I had ever seen from her. From that day forward, something quietly changed between us. Nothing inappropriate happened. We remained professional. But there was warmth where there had once been distance. We started having lunch together occasionally. She began asking about my grandmother. I learned that Seraphina hated thunderstorms, loved old bookstores, and kept a tiny photograph of her parents inside her desk drawer. She learned that I cooked terrible pasta, that I talked to myself whenever I was stressed, and that my grandmother believed every problem in life could be solved with tea. Months passed. The company won the international contract. My grandmother's health improved. And Seraphina slowly became less like my unreachable boss and more like a person who had finally remembered that she was allowed to be happy. Then one bright Friday afternoon, I received an email from her asking me to meet her on the rooftop garden. When I arrived, she was standing beneath a row of flowering trees, wearing a simple cream-colored dress instead of her usual business suit. The city stretched behind her beneath a clear blue sky. She told me she had been thinking about that Tuesday morning. Then she asked whether I remembered what I had accidentally called her. I laughed nervously and admitted that I wished I could forget it. She smiled. She said she didn't. Then she took a step closer and told me that sometimes life gives us moments we are embarrassed by because they reveal something we were too afraid to say intentionally. I didn't know what to say. She looked at me for a long moment and quietly admitted that she had started looking forward to seeing me every morning. My heart raced. I told her that somewhere between the impossible deadlines, terrible coffee, and endless meetings, I had started caring about her too. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she reached for my hand. That simple gesture meant more than any dramatic confession could have. There was no perfect music playing in the background. No crowd cheering. No magical movie ending. There were simply two wounded people standing beneath the afternoon sun, realizing that love didn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it arrived accidentally. Sometimes it began with one embarrassing word. Sometimes the person who seemed the coldest was actually the person who had been waiting the longest for someone to see the warmth hidden underneath. Years later, people in the company still joked about the day I called Seraphina baby. Nobody knew the entire story. They didn't know that one careless word had cracked open a wall she had spent years building around her heart. And Seraphina never let me forget it. Whenever I became too serious, she would give me that familiar look and remind me that the most successful relationship in the company had started with the worst professional mistake in corporate history. But there was something I never told her until much later. That morning, when I accidentally called her baby, it wasn't completely accidental. Not consciously. Not intentionally. But somewhere deep inside, before my mind had caught up with my heart, I had already stopped seeing her as the ice-cold woman everyone feared. I had seen the lonely woman behind the silence. The kind woman behind the reputation. The human being behind the title. And sometimes, that's all someone needs. Not someone to fix them. Not someone to save them. Just someone willing to look beyond the walls and say, without fear, I see you. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who believes people can heal through kindness, and subscribe to Kindness Legacy. Your engagement tells us that these stories still matter and that there are people out there who believe compassion can change a life. And here is my special request. Comment kindness sees beyond the walls if you believe everyone deserves a second chance at happiness. Because the truth is, we never really know what someone is carrying behind a serious face, a cold voice, or a distant personality. The person who seems impossible to reach may simply be protecting a heart that has already been broken once. So be kind. Be patient. And when life gives you the chance to make someone feel seen, don't waste it. Because sometimes one unexpected word can change everything. And sometimes, the person who asks you to say it again is the person who was secretly hoping to hear it all along.